Frank Moss, our goalkeeper, Lancashire lad. David Jack, our inside right. Joe Hume, our flying outside right. And the popular captain, Tom Parker. He's not so old as he looks, by the way.
Mr. Chapman's activities attracted publicity, but the press did not interfere with the casual way in which he tried to sign top players for the Arsenal.
Is that fine? Yep.
I was invited, or rather asked, to go and meet the Clapton chairman at Forest Gate at 7:30 one evening. And when I turned up there, I didn't know anything about what he wanted, and he never told me until a Mr. Chapman arrived and introduced me and who he was, Arsenal Football Club. That didn't mean anything very much to me at that time. I was a West Ham fan. And we just went along to the local Lions tea shop, have a cup of tea or coffee, whatever it was, and over there, it was there that Mr. Chapman asked me to sign amateur forms for the club.
George Mayle started as an amateur, like many footballers did in the 1930s. And when he first signed professional papers, the club, as was normal then, only paid him the minimum wage, a tiny proportion of their large gate receipts.
The minimum wage in those days for a professional football league professional player was £4 a week. The maximum was 8, plus any little bits of bonus you might get for winning or losing a match or drawing.
In 1933, I was taken to Highbury by Mr. Kay, my manager at Southampton. We went to see the Arsenal Rangers game, and after the game, went into Mr. Herbert Chapman's office. Absolutely, the room was splendour, trophies all around. And I met this wonderful man, and he had words of encouragement for me. And shortly afterwards, I was transferred to the Arsenal, but unfortunately, it wasn't Mr. Herbert Chapman that signed me, it was Mr. George Allison, and what had happened was that football's tragedy, Mr. Herbert Chapman passed away after a short illness, and that was football's tragic loss.
He had been up north and came back and was feeling chilly with a cold, but he would watch the schoolboys' game and came home, and he really had got a bad cold. And it was all, I must have a hot bath, and everybody was running around in circles, and this was normal. But he went to bed, and it obviously was a very bad cold. And the club doctor came out to see Dad and was very kind, very good. And, but couldn't save him. Before the funeral, a week after my father died, we had all the players coming up to the house, and it was very upsetting, really, because big chaps like Herbie Robertson were just sobbing, crying. And they all came, to the house to see him before the funeral, and then but there were such crowds and people standing up on houses all around and things, and the flowers were marvellous. They'd hung them up on trees all around the churchyard, and the ground was covered with them. Some beautiful flowers from abroad.
Well, Arsenal won the championship, or brought the championship to the south, more than perhaps the towns are better than just Arsenal winning the championship, in the 1930 to 31, I think it was. And then the following season, they nearly did the double, which was believed inconceivable at the time. And these triumphs were under Herbert Chapman. And then they really got underway, full steam ahead. They won the championship, and then were halfway towards winning it again when Chapman died in 1934. George Allison arrived. He was a director, was made manager, to steady the boat and keep them on course. They won the championship that year, and then again in the following season, despite the increasing competition against Arsenal.
I'm here today with the Arsenal football team, and in a moment you'll see just what a fine lot of fellows they are. We're all looking forward most eagerly and in the keenest anticipation to the forthcoming season. As league champions, we have a very high standard of football to maintain, and I sincerely hope and trust and believe we will maintain it.
One of the young players signed at the age of 14 who became a professional in 1935 was Dennis Compton.
It was fairly simple for me because I'd been 3 years on the ground staff and everybody knew me. And then when I became of age, as you might say, 17, I was called in by George Allison, and he said, "We want you to turn professional for us. You want to?" And I said, "I do, sir." "And your mother and father are for it?" I said, "Yes, sir, that's right." I just signed my name and that was it.
In 1932, the Arsenal Football Club had paid £45,000 to build the luxurious West Stand, opened by the Prince of Wales in December of that year. And in 1935, the club had erected a cover over the North Terraces, which was to be destroyed by firebombs during the war. In 1936, the East Stand was demolished to make way for an even more splendid stand, complete with commentary box and new offices. But the club had incurred a debt of £200,000 to pay for all these improvements, which meant that a gate of at least 40,000 was needed for each home game.
The East Stand went up, was rebuilt in 1936. This was going to be the last word in, well, it was at the time, the last word in football stadia. I remember the dressing rooms were superb. There were tiled floors, and in winter, of course, you can get cold feet, so they'd heated the area under where your feet went. And when you came in on a match day, all your playing kit was laid out, spick and span and businesslike, and you were going into a professional environment straight away, made for football. And in addition, of course, we had a gymnasium upstairs, treatment rooms, the latest thing in methods of getting players fit after they'd had an injury. Showers, baths, and luxury unlimited.
Oh, I think I've got to describe the Arsenal dressing rooms as very, very palatial. Beautiful. They spent a great deal of money on them. And there, of course, the trainer then was Tom Whitaker, who, in fact, was to become manager of Arsenal. And a wonderful man he was as well, very popular, loved by all the players.
In the mid-1930s, the first team players and the reserve team, who dominated the football combination, together maintained Arsenal's record as the leading club in the country. And their success and glamour won them the loyalty of thousands of fans from all walks of life.
I was living in Stoke Newington at the time when I first went there, Stoke Newington, Stamford Hill, and in 1934 we moved up into Mill Hill East, Holders Hill Road. Then we had a car and we used to go to most of the home games and Chelsea and Stamford Bridge. I remember going to Stamford Bridge when there was 82,000 people there, a league game, and we stood in the terrace for a shilling, and there wasn't a fight or there wasn't even a shove. There could have been 40,000 there as far as we were concerned. And 82,000 there was there, and for a shilling there was no pushing, no shoving, no fights, no nothing.
From the first moment one arrived in that ground, the hum, the murmur of the crowd, the band marching round, oh yes, they were lovely days. And we used to regard it, of course, as a complete refreshment after a week's work in the studios with the long, long hours and the nervous tension. And we were such regular followers that we grew to know the players, and They came down to the studios when I was making Noel Gwynn. I remember photographs with Drake and Beston and Moss, the goalkeeper.
One of the thrills of watching the Arsenal in the 30s was to see Joe Hume be given a pass somewhere near the halfway line, and without a moment's hesitation he trapped the ball and he'd go down the wing like a rocket. 9 times out of 10 he beat the back for pace. He'd put over a high centre, and either Jack Lambert was there to meet the centre or David Jack, and then of course later on in the 30s we had Ted Drake to finish it off.
Drake, who was almost like a lion going into the thing. He was strong. There was Beston, who was lightning. He was light on the left wing.
Alec James was the greatest footballer the world has ever seen. They can talk about their Peelers and they can talk about Puskos and Rach Carter. They was all good, but James was outstanding. James had more little tricks in his one foot than all the others had got in there too.
You see, because Alec was a brilliant footballer, but at the same time he could be awkward. Because you see, with a football club, you've got, say, 24 or 26 good players. Some are reserve team players, but Alec was one of the top notchers, you see. We all were in those days. Well, there was about 18 of us, top notchers, if you like, you see. And Alec sort of took advantage of it.
Dear Alex James. Alex James was my greatest player as far as I'm concerned. I know he was the greatest player to play with. And what a lovely little fellow. I remember when I first came to the club, being a centre forward, I thought I needed fattening up or something, and he took me home and said to his wife, "There you are, cook him a nice steak," and this was typical Alec.
In November 1934, Arsenal's manager, George Allison, had the rare honour of seeing 7 of his first team picked to play for England in a notorious match against Italy, the team who that summer had won the World Cup. As England had refused to take part in the World Cup competition, this England versus Italy match, held at Highbury, became a battle for the World Championship, in which the Arsenal played a major role.
Prince Arthur of Connaught with the bearded Signor Grandi shakes hands first with England, wearing white shirts, then with the Italian team. An Italian insists on showing the flag. The Swedish referee tosses up, Alamondi of Italy loses.
There was a feeling between the Italians and ourselves, I don't know why, and we did a few years afterwards, but it had come to our notice that the team itself had received a wire and just simply said, "For your country's sake, win," Muslim, didn't he? Well, that came to our knowledge, and he said, "Over our dead bodies."
Play continues at fever heat. More sensations follow. Brooke of Manchester City opens the score with a brilliant header. 1 up in 9 minutes. The pace is very fast. England continuing their forcing tactics, and now Brooke takes another penalty kick and scores again. 2 up in 12 minutes. England's vigorous assault is not yet held, and their centre forward Drake scores with a beautiful hook. 3 up in less than a quarter of an hour. A nasty shock for the team which is referred to as world soccer champions.
We were 3 up at one stage. They came back and made it 3-2, but Frank Moss was injured. Hapgood got injured. It was a bloody sort of a match. It was really it, and it was termed later on the Bloodbath of Highbury.
Eddie Hapgood's broken nose was tended by Tom Whittaker, who also dealt in the treatment room at Highbury with Ted Drake, Cliff Bastin, Frank Moss and Ray Bowden. Drake's aggressive style of play and a persistent cartilage problem meant that he was frequently injured. But he held, and still holds, the Arsenal's top goal-scoring record for a season. 42 goals in 1934-5, and for a match on December the 14th, 1935, played away from home.
One of those unforgettable occasions when Drake scored 7 goals against Aston Villa. I mean, it didn't seem true.
Well, the first goal that was scored, we never heard a sound. We didn't realise he'd scored because with being away, there wasn't any supporters, many supporters there. And that was in those days, you didn't really realise. There was no cheering at all from the other team, the home team. And we suddenly realised that he scored, and then from then on, the passing, and they deteriorated so much, the Villa, that Ted made he just done what he liked with them, absolutely.
Well, we went on and on and on, and I scored another one, and then I scored another go, and eventually I finished up getting 7. And then after I'd got the 7th, the last one, I ran in and hit this ball, hit the under part of the bar, and came down, and I claimed a goal. And the referee said, "Goodness me, Ted, you've got 7." You don't. And but I thought that was over, to be honest. But you can't tell. And yes, I was very pleased. But that's my job. I love scoring goals.
Cup final day, and the fans from Sheffield are on their way in search of that cook.
In the 1935-6 season, Arsenal were once again in the cup final, this time against Sheffield United.
And Londoners, you can guess they're going to be there as well, with the war cry on their lips, up the Gunners, up the Reds, never dreaming that the famous Arsenal can fail.
Although football fans flocked to Wembley in the usual way, the cup final on April the 25th, 1936 was a slightly unusual affair, in that no member of the royal family was present because of the abdication crisis, and the newsreel companies went to ridiculous extremes to cover the game because a dispute over fees with the Football Association prevented them from filming inside the stadium. Arsenal, with Alex James as captain, were clear favourites, and Ted Drake expected to add a cup winner's medal to his other trophies.
The game at Wembley, when we played Sheffield United, looking back to us, was a great disappointment because we felt that we should have been convincing winners. I don't think one can feel that way at Wembley, because when you go to Wembley, it's even Steven there. Well, it's very even. And this proved it with Sheffield United, because really we thought we were 3 or 4 to 1 on, or I did anyway, but things didn't materialise like that, and they made us go, and it was something like about 18 minutes from the end of the game when Alex James got the ball and done a shuffle and gave it a pass down the wing to Cliff Bastin, who went on, took it on, beat somebody, looked up, squared it well past to me at just about on the 18-yard box, when I connected with my old left foot, which was my gammy, and it went home.
Sheffield thrown in full time, so the final whistle goes, and Arsenal have won the cup this year by 1-0.
Great jubilation, needless to say, great happiness all round. It does seem an extraordinary thing. I don't know whether it's essentially a British characteristic, but these things do mean a great deal to us, don't they?
Everyone knows that the newsreels won the cup final, though Arsenal got all the credit. Captain Alex James, with goal-scorer Drake, refused to hand over the cup to our heroic cameramen, and quite a number of soccer fans turned out to see the conquering heroes arrive at the Islington Town Hall for their civic reception.
This was the Arsenal, still at the height of their power. And although they won the league again in 1937-8, it was with the lowest number of points, and they were deemed to be on a decline, which was hastened by the outbreak of war in 1939. In the 1930s, they had won all of football's highest honours, and the greatest individual contributor to those honours was Alex James, who retired in 1937.
I remember Alec James's last league game. It was against Portsmouth at Highbury, and he got a wonderful send-off. Portsmouth then, instead of being a third division club as they are now, were one of the leading clubs in the country. They won the cup in 1939. And it was a very sentimental, well, Alec James was a sentimental person. Although at times he seemed to be headstrong, even to having arguments with Herbert Chapman, he was Arsenal through and through. And it was a great wrench when James, who'd done more for Arsenal, I think, than any other player in the club's history, when James finally decided he had to give it up. And although we won the match, the main recollection of that afternoon is James showing his magic for the last time, his long pants flapping in the breeze, and that fluttering foot. He used to have a wonderful habit of pushing his right foot back as though he was going backwards with the ball, and then pushing it forwards and leaving the opponent stranded. That fluttering foot, the last time we saw it. And the wonderful reception he got from the crowd at the end. Nostalgia.